Hey, welcome to another week of digital learning, 6th grade. This week is pretty simple, actually. We're just going to be going through exercise 5. And so what you're going to need for this video, there's something new to learn, there's something new to take notes on, but you're going to need your notebook. And I'm actually going to walk you through the even numbers of exercise 5. And then afterwards, what you're going to do is go through the odd numbers of exercise 5. So in exercise 5, in your Ovid book, grab your Ovid book and your notebook and something to write with. And when we go through that exercise, there are 10 sentences that it's asking you to translate. It's English into Latin. And we are going to go through, like I said, the even numbers. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We're going to walk through them slowly on the board. I'm going to talk you through kind of the steps of translating. And then afterwards, you're going to go through and do the other ones. So 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. On Thursday, just like the previous weeks, I'll post or email out, or both, the answer key, so you can go back and check and make corrections. You're free to ask any questions on our weekly Zoom call or ask any questions via email. Anything that gets you stuck or that you're kind of like, I just can't figure this sentence out, just go ahead and reach out. That's what we have our Zoom calls for. That's what we have email for throughout this whole process. But we're going to go through in this video. I'm going to do them on the whiteboard to the best that I can, as we would do in class, where we put our sentences up and then we break them down and we translate them together. So go ahead and pause if you need a minute to get your things together, your notebook and something to write with, and your textbook. And we're going to go through exercise 5. So and that's the great thing about these videos, is you can pause at any time if you need to catch up. We're going to go ahead, and you do need to have the English written down and the Latin. And so if you need to take a minute and get to the next page in your notebook, denote that you're doing exercise 5 like we do, put your little V, that's the Roman numeral 5, and copy down the English sentences and then skip spaces for the Latin and be prepared to start. If you've already done that already, great, you're ahead of the game. If you haven't, just take a minute and get ready, and we're going to go through, like I said, in this video, the even numbered sentences, and then afterwards you'll finish up with the odd number sentences. Keep studying your vocab, and we're getting really close to the end of this chapter. Next week, we're going to translate the story, and then we'll be able to move on after the test into part 2 of this story, because this is a 2-part one, so that's great. But overall, you guys are doing great. I love seeing you on our Zoom meetings, and it seems like you guys are doing well with your work. Again, keep reaching out, keep asking any questions, but whenever you're ready, let's get started. So each time when we start, I'm going to put the sentence up first in Latin, but of course, follow along with your book. So number 2, that's what we're starting with. First, as we always do, find the verb. So I shall tell, that's our verb. Find the verb first, just like when we're doing English into Latin. It's always helpful. Then what's the object? What are we telling? Well, the object, the direct object, and the indirect object are here. I'm telling the story to you and of old people. That's kind of part of our direct object. It's actually a possessive part here, or we can use a prepositional phrase. So there's 2 options, but again, start with our verb. That's I shall tell. I is the subject. It's actually built into our verb. And then our object here is the story. That's the thing I'm telling. That's our direct object. Our indirect object here is you, because I'm telling the story to you. And then what we're telling our story about is our prepositional phrase. We're actually going to use the preposition de, about, for this phrase here. And so once we've gotten everything kind of separated like this, let's remember what happens in Latin. So indirect objects, they go in the dative case. Direct objects, they go in the accusative case. Let's make a note of that. That way when we're translating, we've just made it easy for ourselves. We know our verb. And then our prepositional phrase, like I said, we're using the preposition de, and de goes with the ablative case. So we've broken everything down. Remember, again, our subject is built into the verb. That's I am the subject here. We've got it all broken down, so let's get ready to translate. So like I said, once we've got all of that down, I actually erased this spot right here just to give us a little bit more space where it said day, but we remember that that's there. So when we're getting started with translating, we start with our verb. We've got I shall tell. So we know the root of that is nero. That's what we're dealing with. So ner is our stem. But then we need to figure out, okay, it's I shall. So it's a future tense here. So we're dealing with bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. And since it's I shall tell, it's narabo, because that's our first person ending. And then I'm telling something to you. And we know tibi is the form of to you. That's the dative form of you here. Since I'm telling something to you, you're the indirect object. And the something I'm telling you here is the story. So that's our direct object. We know story is fabula, but what ending do we need? If it's the accusative, we need to think through our chart. The accusative ending here, so narabo tibi fabulam, and then of two old people. Here I'm going to use a prepositional phrase de, so I'm telling you the story about two old people. And so we need to put those in the ablative, plural, because it's two old people. Duabus senibus. There we go. Narabo tibi fabulam duabus senibus. I'll keep it up for a second for you to copy it down. For number 4, we've got a real simple one here. The lake is now full of fish. Here we go. So we're starting really simply. We find our verb, and our verb in this sentence is pretty simple. It just is. So something is something else. It's pretty straightforward. The thing that is the lake. That's our subject. So that's what we're dealing with here. The lake is full of fish. And so once we figure that full, that's what we're talking about. That's our adjective. And so the adjective here is referring back to the lake and then of fish. That's an interesting thing we're going to have to think about. What are we thinking when we do of fish? That of is our clue here. And that of is the clue that tells us that we're putting this actually as because it's possessive in the genitive case. And so that of is going to be a big clue for us when we look at sentences in the Latin. And now it's just a qualifier here. And when we've got all of our pieces together, we just remind ourselves what cases these go with. So the nominative case is what we use for the subject. And so we can put that down there. And then our adjective, since it has to match, is also going to go in the nominative case because that's referring to the lake. So full is referencing the lake. And then, like I said, the genitive case is what we use for possession. So for of fish, we're putting that in the genitive case. So once we have all these pieces, we can start translating. The lake, the word we're going to use here is stagnum. I know in your vocab list that says pool. What that means for pool is pond, lake, all of those. So stagnum. And then it is, that's just our simple est. Stagnum est. Nunc here, it's just a quick vocab word. Nunc, now means nunc. That's what we're talking about. The lake is now. It's just a simple word to plug in there. It's just a vocab memorization. And then we're talking about full. Here is plenus, but since it's got to pair with stagnum, it's got to be plenum. And then fish, let's remember Piscis. Piscis is actually an I stem, which is important since it's in the genitive case. So that means when we put piscis in the genitive plural, it's actually going to be piscium instead of just piscum because it's got that I stem right there. So it keeps the I. So that's one difference that it's going to have that's important for this sentence. So let's put this all up here. Stagnum est nunc plenum piscium. This is number 6, but just as a reminder, guys, you can pause and rewind at any point if it's moving too fast. That's the great thing about these videos. Pause if you need to copy something down, pause if something gets confusing, and move back to it. So we're on number 6. We're doing great. Only one small cottage was open to the king of the gods. So pause at any point. I'm just giving you that reminder here. So let's move to this one. Only one small cottage was open to the king of the gods. Lots of elements here. Again, find our verb first. Was. Pretty simple. Something was something else. So what is our something in this case? It's actually this whole phrase at the beginning. Only one small cottage is our subject. So all of these words are going to go in the nominative case because all of these words are our subject. And then our verb here was. And then after our verb, open to the king of the gods, let's look at this clause. So open here, we're going to think about that, the use of that. That's an adjective. And so that adjective open is actually referring back to our subject. So it's going to pair together with only one small cottage. So that adjective, just to keep in mind, we're going to go back in the nominative case as well. And then to the king of the gods, there's a lot happening here. So the to the king is important. That tells us that it's an indirect object. And then of the gods is telling us that that's a possessive. So that's a genitive case. So we're actually using almost all of our cases here. Oops, for a minute I thought it was the direct object, but it's actually not. It's the indirect object. So I had to go back and fix that. Sometimes we make mistakes, but that's why we have whiteboards. So that of here, like I said in that last piece, of reminds us that it's showing possession. It is the pencil of Benjamin. It is Benjamin's pencil. It shows possession. So let's go back. Our subject goes in the nominative case. Our adjective here, like I said, since it's referring back to our subject, also goes in the nominative case. When we have an indirect object in the sentence, it goes in the dative. When something shows possession, it goes in the genitive. So just like I said, almost all the cases are in use here. This is kind of fun. Now that we have all these pieces, we're ready to start translating. So let's start with our subject here. Again, this subject is all of these pieces. Only one small cottage is all our subject. So only, that's our words, solum. One, remember one does decline, so it's got to pair with cottage, and so does small. So let's first think of what cottage is, just to keep us on track. For this, we're actually going to use the same word as we would use for house. So casa is the word we know for house so far. There's another word we'll learn for house later, but this is what we've got. So since una and parwa, since they have to pair with casa, they've got to have those same endings. So solum, casa, una, parwa. Was, that's our verb here. So let's think of he was, she was, it was. That's our eram, eras, erot chart because it's past tense. So eram, eras, erot. One small cottage was. Since it was open, let's think of apertus. But it's got to actually pair with our terms that we've already used. And so casa una parwa, so it's going to be aperta. And then to the king of the gods. We're going to put king in the dative case, and then we're going to put gods in the genitive case. And so this is kind of crazy. We're in two different declensions. So king is going to go in the dative, so that goes rex, regis, regi, and then of the gods is going to go in the genitive plural, and so that's actually going to be deorum. So regi, deorum is going to be the end of your sentence. So solum casa una parwa erat regi deorum. We're doing so good. We're on number 8. So this one, we got a simple one again. Balkis gave food and wine to the gods. So let's start with our verb. That's gave. This is a past tense verb. So that's kind of cool, but it is pretty simple. So let's mark it there. That's our verb. Someone is giving something to someone else. So who is that someone? It looks like the subject of our sentence here is going to be Balkis. Balkis gave something to someone else, and he gave food and wine, which is so nice. So that's the object of what he's giving. Food and wine, that's both the object. And then to the gods, that's our indirect object. So again, that to the triggers us that it's an indirect object. Balkis is giving something to someone else. So when we go and figure out all of these things, we know Balkis is our subject. And then so that goes in the nominative. Our object, the food and wine, goes in the accusative. And so both of these together, and it is our conjunction right there. But wine, Holly's helping me out, so she's going to be our helper here. And our indirect object here goes in the dative case. So once we've got all of that marked, we're just plugging in vocabulary. It's very simple. I know, she's very excited about that. She loves Latin.